It has been said that in Twilight Struggle, you need to know the cards well in order to play well. Well, we're going to take you through every card one by one, and we're going to help you become a master at Twilight Struggle. This is Legendary Tactics. Today we're going to look at Duck and Cover, which is a card that is very intriguing. It can actually change the gameplay quite a bit. It can be used effectively by both the US and the USSR player. And so today we're going to look at how each side can use this card to their advantage. Despite this being an American event, this is actually potentially a great event for the USSR. The reason for this is because it allows them to place 3 influence or use the 3 ops, and at the same time degrade DEFCON 1 level, which effectively and most commonly is used to stop the US from getting a battleground coup on their turn. It does give the US some victory points though, so you have to take that into consideration. In addition, it can limit the amount of mill-ops that both sides get, so you're going to need to put that into your calculus as to whether it's a good card to play at that particular moment. In many ways, it's good to think of Duck and Cover as a card to use early when the DEFCON is at 4 or 5, something like that, to limit the victory point cost. If you use this card to degrade the DEFCON 1 level from 3 to 2, it does hand the US 3 victory points. And again, you have to be careful of the mill-ops effect as well. If you're unable to make those up, it could be a much better card for the US. Here's an example of how to use Duck and Cover to great effect as a USSR player. Let's say it's the beginning of turn 2, and the USSR headlines De Gaulle leads France. So that reduces the influence in France by 2 and adds a USSR influence. A follow-up of Duck and Cover will allow them to play the 3 ops into France to take control, and will simultaneously lower DEFCON likely from 3 to 2, which means that the US player does not get their battleground coup elsewhere in the world. Another interesting play is, let's say that the Iran coup fails, and the US player, thinking ahead, decides to put influence elsewhere on the board because they want the last opportunity to coup Iran before the DEFCON drops to 2, and that becomes impossible. So what the USSR player can do is, say, use that Duck and Cover card to coup Iran. Hopefully it works this time, and that will lower the DEFCON to 2, which will mean that the US player will not be able to have the last coup of the turn as they had planned. Another interesting play is that if the US player plays SALT negotiations and improves DEFCON to, let's say, 4, then you can use Duck and Cover to boost your influence, say, in Thailand, and then because the DEFCON degrades back to 3, it protects your newly gotten gain. This can also be effective if you find yourself at DEFCON 5 and you want to protect a country like Thailand from a coup. So you could use the Duck and Cover card to coup a battleground country, and then DEFCON would drop to 3, which would limit your opponent's options. Now you also have to be careful. Duck and Cover is what you call a DEFCON suicide card, which means that if you are forced to play it at the wrong time, you can accidentally trigger nuclear war and lose the game. So if you ever find yourself at DEFCON 2, you can safely send this card to space. There are other creative ways that the USSR can use Duck and Cover. Now, I came across this example online, and I'm not sure as to its effectiveness overall. I mean, there's some debate on that and so forth, but I think the mindset that it gives you is a good one, in that it keeps you open to the various possibilities that this card affords you. So, for example, let's say on the last action round of turn 3, the US decides to create a dilemma, to present a dilemma to the USSR player playing into Colombia. Now, on the next action round of the next turn, the USSR has the option of either coupping Colombia and missing out on that first turn battleground coup opportunity, or they can coup a battleground state as they normally would on the first action round of a new turn. However, this would allow the US to then play into Venezuela and potentially expand further into South America, or they can coup and give that opportunity to the U.S. So it's kind of it's a dilemma. It's a classic move on the U.S. part. The idea is to create confusion on the last action round so that the USSR player has to make a tough decision. Either take a battleground coup and lose South America, or coup Colombia and then give the battleground coup to the US. So in this case, you could use duck and cover to coup Colombia. In that case, that would degrade DEFCON likely down from 3 until 2 and would prevent the US player from getting that first battleground state coup that they were counting on. So it's that kind of mindset of how to use this card creatively to protect your gains and stymie the US player overall. Another state where this could potentially work is Lebanon, where you could coup with duck and cover, drop the DEFCON to 2 to protect your gain there and also prevent the US from coupping a battleground elsewhere. Another interesting combination you might not have thought of is actually a combination of headlining Vietnam revolts as the USSR. This would allow you to move into Vietnam and then following that up with duck and cover and using this card as for a coup on Iran. That would drop the DEFCON to 3, which would mean you could move into Thailand completely unopposed. Duck and cover can be used very creatively by the USSR. Basically though, what it allows is for the USSR to coup a battleground and drop DEFCON by 2 when that is useful. Also to do a move of any sort and still degrade DEFCON by 1 level, which again can be useful to lock the US player out of coupping and getting mill-ops. Also locking down regions that would otherwise be troublesome for the USSR player. Basically, for the US player, duck and cover is a great 3-ops card. You may not want to use the event because especially in the early war, 3-ops is very valuable and you may not want to give those up. But if there is an opportunity to drop DEFCON to protect an area or to prevent the USSR from making a coup, that is potentially something to look at. The best use of it might be in the headline, especially in turns 2 and 3, which would prevent the USSR from using their battleground coup advantage in the first action round and also get you a few victory points. Duck and cover as a headline can also potentially win you the game in the early war. If, for example, DEFCON is at 3 and you play duck and cover as a headline, that degrades DEFCON 1 level. If the USSR player happens to have CIA created and is trying to dump that out of their hand, as that's a potential DEFCON suicide card, they may unintentionally create a DEFCON suicide situation because the US can conduct operations as if they played a 1-op card. So if the US conducts operations as a coup in a battleground state, then because that happened on the USSR headline, the USSR is given the credit for ending the world. In other words, they lose the game. So it can be kind of a cheap win in many ways, but hey, a win is a win, and especially as the US player who is generally seen to play at a disadvantage in this game, I'll take any win I can get. Duck and cover becomes a much riskier headline play in the mid and late wars because of cards like We Will Bury You. If the USSR player happens to headline this card and the DEFCON is at 3, as it normally is mid-game, the DEFCON would drop 1 level for the USSR card, and then the US card duck and cover would drop it to 1, and you would commit DEFCON suicide. So you have to be careful about that. There are potential cards in the deck that can cause DEFCON suicide, and so you do have to be careful in the mid and late war. Another late war card that can cause the same issue as We Will Bury You is the Soviets shoot down KAL-007. It's a very unusual headline for the USSR. However, if they are playing 3-dimensional chess and they figure you're going to headline duck and cover, then it's a way for them to force you to commit DEFCON suicide. So just be careful of these cards, and remember that in the early war it's safe to headline duck and cover, but mid and late war you want to think twice and just make sure that these cards have already passed, or you don't have to worry about them otherwise. Duck and Cover is one of the more intriguing early war cards, and we've spent some time covering how to best use it for both sides. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.